Hello, my name is Hatim Damra, and in this screencast, I will be implementing this login form for the above line Junior Developer Test. After reading through the instructions, I've decided to implement this using my own Webpack configuration, as opposed to something like Create React App. I just feel like it gives me more flexibility. Some of the tools I utilized with this Webpack configuration is using the Webpack Dev Server, Babel Loader for transpiling JavaScript, React ES6, also CSS Style Loader and File Loader to deal with the CSS. In my package.json, it shows this is the stuff I will be using. React DOM. I'm sorry, the libraries I'll be using. React DOM has dependencies, dev dependencies. I use these are basically all the Babel libraries needed to for transpiling Webpack and Webpack Dev Server, and I got the start dev command to start running the development server. And so basically my setup here is in my Webpack, the entry directory is the source folder where I put the template index.html, which Webpack will use as a template for the HTML file when it bundles. And the index.js is the entry for the project, the entry file for the project. So this should be ready. So I'm going to start off by making a components directory. And in the directory, I will start off by creating the app.js file. And in the index file, I'm going to import app from the components directory. And basically, app is really going to be the main container of this login form application. It's going to be basically where the entry file index.js will import the container, which in turn the container will import all the other components and functionality in this application. And I like to start off with setting up some of the CSS, the styling of these components. And I use styled components library, which basically I felt has an upper hand over just using regular CSS or even modular CSS, like such as Sass, because it allows you to just include it directly in the React file or React component if you like. It's just a personal preference. I've worked with Sass before and just regular CSS, but this is my preferred way of writing CSS for my components. So this will contain this file will contain the CSS for the components. And this first component will be the container, which basically is the main container for the application, which will basically house all other components. And as you can see, I've utilized Flexbox. I just really appreciate its the power it gives you as far as responsiveness and just overall structure to the application. I've also worked with CSS Grid, and I actually like CSS Grid as much as I do Flexbox. It's just the only issue with it is your browser compatibility. So for the most part, I use Flexbox. And the next component to be the box. Okay, so this box container is basically going to be a div which holds the boxes, either the white or red boxes that are seen on the login page over here. And basically, I'm putting a Boolean check here to check if it's the boxes. If it's the box container that's on the top, then it should get a certain style, and if it's otherwise, it should receive different styling rules. And well, actually, I should call this form box. If it is column, display it as column. If not, display it as row. And okay, so also another check here. I want to check if it doesn't have the props.top, then it should display flex end. Otherwise, display as flex start. And finally, for the box itself, okay, so before I started this screencast, I actually played around with the CSS for a few minutes, and I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, background color. Okay, so yeah, background color based on whatever basically you pass to the component. Whatever color you pass to the component is the color that I would like it to display. Okay, for this here, the margin, basically I want to do a check to see if which box it is, meaning that is it one of the red boxes in the corner, such as these, the 4 red boxes, or if it's this box in the middle over here. And based on the check, basically that's what margin it will receive. So So basically, if it is the form box, I want it to have -15 view height and 0. And if not, I want it to have 0 and 1 view width. Okay. So I think this will do it for the styles. I have to go back here and import box container. And box. So in here, container. Box. So here in the app.styles, I did put a check for if the top prop was passed to the component, and depending on whether that checks out to be true or false, it will receive certain styles. So here you just add the two boxes in here. Yes, the color. Okay. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Okay, so yeah, this particular box over here. I want it to have the form box so that passing it the form box prop will basically give it a certain the styling that I set up in the styles folder. And I also want to add some inline styling here just to make sure that and no other boxes overlap it. This is the box that's supposed to be on top. Okay, there we go. Title. Okay, so now what I want to do is add a form into this middle box, the white box over here, which will basically include the username input, the password input, and the submit button for the form. And it'll basically be a form that is included into the app component, and its functionality is going to be basically the logic for it is basically going to be in the app component and then passed down as props as well as the state. So what I want to do first is create some styles for the form, and I could call this styles.js. So this is going to contain some basic styling for the form. Get some margin. Okay. Button style here. I think that's it. So then I'm going to create the form component itself in the components folder. And we're passing it the props for it to have access to the state and functionality and methods of the app component. To import the styling, which was the input. So I want two input tags. One for the username, one for the password, and a button which says login. And the first input, basically, I'm going to set its type to just text. Give it a name of username, just as a reference, and a placeholder. Enter user. And for this one, I want to give it a type of password, so that the characters of the password don't actually are not apparent. And then give it a name, a password, and placeholder. Enter. Need to export. .js. We need to import this component. Save all and check. Okay. Okay, so this is not looking good. Okay, so what I can do is just put a simple, excuse me, put a simple line break. Should fix it. Okay, much better. Okay. I want to center it too. Style. Text line. Believe this should fix it. Yep. Okay. So type in here and password. Okay. So now, basically, what I want to do is start adding on the functionality. First thing I wanted to do is have a function which checks the credential, or checks what the input that the user provides to kind of validate, just a validation check to see if it's, you don't just press the button without actually entering in, your username or your password. So just a simple validation check, and this I'll go to source and call it validate. Validate.js. Simple validation. Takes a argument, takes a parameter person, which is the person trying to log in, set a variable of errors to an empty object. Okay, actually, yeah. So it's going to check if the person did not give us a username, then I want the errors object to have a property of errors.username, which will be username is required. And if same thing for the password. Password. Password is required. Return errors. And this will be used in our app component. So I also wanted to include an area right beneath the form where you can kind of have the display error or success messages so that the user knows that if their login went through or if they're just left one of the fields blank. So yeah, this area will basically display helpful messages to the user about the status of their login. And okay, let me, before I forget, I want to create a component for the error message. And right below the form here, I'm going to have basically 3 different error message components that will display different messages depending on the status of the login or validation. And that basically is going to be all set up in here in the app component. So yeah, the app component will be given state, and it will be given event handlers also to deal with that. And first of all, I want to do the state, which is the fields. Save. Check that. Everything's still okay. Yep. Okay. Okay. So yeah, the fields which will track the state of the input for username and password. And then I also want to have errors object, which will kind of I'll initialize with as an empty object and basically update the state based on the user input or lack thereof. And then a success, for if the user login is successful. Okay, so first I want to get to the call it handle change. And this basically is going to be an event handler for the input, the username and password fields. And it's going to be a controlled input, meaning that the inputs will receive their values from the parent component, which gets the value will get passed down as a prop and will get filled into the input, first going up from the input itself to the parent component, then pass back to the input as props. That way, just to keep it as a controlled form. So, asset event. Okay, so we'll do some destructuring and grab the fields object off of this.state. Some destructuring also for the event object, or actually target. Okay, so yeah, so the names that we set here we can now actually access through the event object to use and basically performing any updates to the state after after the change, the onChange event happens when the user inputs something into the input field. So target name, which is a reference to the name of the username and password inputs, and fields. This will assign it. This will assign the fields in the state the value of that input component. And then basically we set the fields to fields, and just make sure the error stays on empty object, and that success is also okay. And then we basically pass handle change, the handle change method, to the form. And since I am using transform class properties from Babel, there's no need to bind the this of the parent component to its child component. It just binds it, since we're using the arrows up here, arrow functions. change event, pass it props dot same here, and just want to test this and see how this is working. Console.log this state dot fields. Oh, this is why. This is why. I should just put it target.value. This should fix it, I believe. There we go. A, B, C, D. And password here. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the next method I want to set up, or event handler, would be the when the person submits or presses on the submit button. Yeah, this is the event handler that will be invoked. I'll call it handle submit. Also pass it the event object, and just when it does submit, I don't want it to automatically send the post request. I'm using something else to do that actually. And default. Okay. So before I connect this to the backend. Basically, I want to validate and check if the input was inputted correctly. So I want to import the validate helper to do this. And yeah, this helper will take care of that for me. And the way this can be set up is also do some structuring here. Fields. And assign errors here to the validate, so it can validate the user input for us. Just give it the fields. I want to check if basically if the errors object, because the validate helper will return an object for us, and I want to check if that object has any properties, then there was something wrong. So it returns. It doesn't actually submit. It doesn't make the post request. So I could do this by saying let error check equals object keys. And this is the object type keys makes an array out of the properties of that object, of the property names. And you pass it the errors. And this is where basically, okay, let me actually make this state. And you would check if error check var check.length, meaning if there is any properties to the returned errors object, which means something was wrong, then return. Do not proceed with making the post request. And here, I just want to do a console log to check that everything is going okay. This here. Oops. State. Comment this out. And let me pass handle submit to the form. Here, set up a event listener. Props.handle. So in here, okay, we save and check. All right, let's see. What's going on here? previously, right? Okay. I put the console log after the return. Okay. So I didn't give the value to the input. And here, let me just go ahead and add props, errors, username, and props errors password. pause, I'll just include the success message here as well. Props dot success and give it an inline style of green to signal that it was a success as opposed to the red color, which is commonly associated with error. And I think this should fix it. There we go. So if we just put username without a password, it will give you password is required, and you put a password without a username, username is required. And now to the final part, which is basically connecting it to the backend. And for this, I will be using a library called Axios. I've used Fetch many times, and I'm comfortable using it. I believe Axios just kind of it makes the process easier. It just adds some layers of abstraction to some of the settings and setup that you would have to do with Fetch. So I'm using Axios for this. And in the app.js, import Axios. Okay, this is just basically plug in the Axios into our app. So what I want to do is go to the handle submit, and after our validator checked and everything was good to go, we want to have Axios do its thing here, and basically okay, so I'm going to use the proxy service cores anywhere. Cores anywhere. And then just basically have it proxy this. And then, yeah, so we want to also do some destructuring here to grab the properties of username and password from state. State fields to send it in a post request. We should just JSON, make sure it's JSON also. So we just post data and JSON string And after the submit button is after somebody presses the submit button, we also want to update the state to reflect the new state of the username and password, which is, we should clear it up. And yeah, then we want to do a post request with Axios, and URL is the first argument. Second argument, we want to add the post data, and it returns a promise, the response argument, which from that response we want to first let me check console log the response. You grab it, and the data that we want from the returned response object is the data property contains whatever value or body was returned from the promise. And just put a capture here. Just to see if anything goes wrong. Okay. So let's try this out. Okay. So it gets this response back from the back end, from the API. And basically what we want to do here is, depending on depending on the if we want to grab this success property here and check if data.success. So we want to see if it went through, if we got a success response from the backend or not, and based on it, update the state so it can update the this message here, props.success. Okay. We want to say this state. Yeah, so state. Success. Login. Successful. And here we put this set state. There was a problem. Okay. I think this is it. Okay. So testing this out. If you put no username password, it's going to give you 2 error messages. Username is required, password is required. If you put the username without the password, it's going to tell you password is required. Clear that up and put password without username. Username is required. And let's say log in with your credentials here. Response.data. There was a problem. Okay. Okay, so this basically this is my test. This is my submission for the test given to me by Above Line. I hope this meets the standards for passing the test, and I am looking forward to hearing more. And I appreciate you reaching out for me and giving me the chance. Thank you very much.